For a contrasting view, on Friday, I also spoke with Jonathan Butcher, the Will Skillman Fellow of Education at the Heritage Foundation. Mr. Butcher, thank you for your time this afternoon. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
We'll just go ahead and take a deep dive into things. I want to ask you, what is your definition of critical race theory?
Critical race theory is a philosophy or worldview that sees everything in public and private life through the lens of race, especially racial oppression. And it divides the world in between those who are oppressors and those who are the oppressed.
And what is it that you're seeing across the nation and schools and school districts and states that's giving you reason for concern about the teaching of critical race theory?
Well, it's not only a theory, it's meant to be applied. Critical race theorists want people to treat others differently based on the color of their skin. There are lesson plans around the country that deal with what is called white privilege, or that make the case that there is a guilt to be had based on the color of someone's skin. And I think that the discriminatory ideas that the Civil Rights Act and the Civil Rights Movement helped to bury many years ago are resurfacing now in a new form of discrimination. And I think that as Americans, we should reject any form of prejudice and discrimination.
Do you believe that racism, systemic racism, and white supremacy still exists in this nation?
Well, I think that individual racist acts still happen, and that's a sad fact of fallen humanity. I think to say that America is systemically racist rejects all of the sacrifice and work and accomplishment that went into passing the Civil Rights Act and that came to shape in the Civil Rights Movement. I think that it is very different to condemn a racist act than to say that the institutions in American life today are themselves racist. And that's not true. Our nation, both our government has rejected racism. It has rejected prejudice and discrimination. And our students need to be taught that America's promise of freedom and opportunity for all is something that we share. This is the civic mission of schools, to let students know that there is an American dream that they can achieve and belongs to them. And critical race theory is twisting this narrative and is making the case that they are oppressed and perhaps have the only choice to disrupt the systems in which they were born, in which their communities are based around.
So do you believe that CRT, in fact, promotes hatred toward white people?
I think it certainly promotes discrimination. I think it divides people into tribes, and it says as much. The multicultural teachings and the ethnic study programs in places like California say so directly, that there are systems of power, that your racial identity is what defines you. Ideas such as intersectionality, which says that not only your racial identity, but your gender, country of origin are all things that are layered with oppression that can be layered on top of each other to create this condition in which you are oppressed by multiple parts of the world around you. And that's the wrong lesson for students to be learning, right? We need to be learning the lesson that you can create your future and that the rights and the freedoms that we have in America are worth defending.
So your opposition is not based on the teaching of certain events in history, whether it was slavery, maybe even the first arrival of the slaves in this country, 1619, Jim Crow era, Civil War, Reconstruction, Voting Rights, Civil Rights Act. You're not opposed to the teaching of those events. Is that what I hear you saying?
Oh, absolutely not. All of those things should be taught. Students need to have a thorough understanding of America's past. They need to know what parts of America's past betrayed our promise of freedom and opportunity to everyone. But that's different than saying that we are systemically or as a part of our government policy racist towards people today. That is the part that the 1619 Project and all of these lessons about white privilege, that is what they are teaching. They are teaching that there are systems that must be destroyed because they are embedded in something that happened years ago that the Civil Rights Act helped to get rid of, and that the Civil Rights Movement demonstrated that culture simply would not stand for anymore. The Civil Rights Movement created a set of shared ideas that we hold today that are rested in the ideas of individual agency, of family, of being able to create a future for yourself based on your own actions not based on the color of your skin.
I'm sure that you've seen that our senior senator and the minority leader in the U.S. Senate, Mitch McConnell, has said that government doesn't really have any business telling teachers what to teach and school districts what curriculum to endorse. And many of those who are criticizing legislative proposals like what is in Kentucky and these other states I mentioned earlier believe that it tampers with the bedrock principles of democracy, a free exchange of ideas, academic freedom, freedom of speech. Your response to that this is a government overreach for those who profess to be for limited government. How is this not a government overreach and tampering with those bedrock principles of democracy?
Well, I think from Washington, it certainly would be. Washington has no place meddling in either state academic standards or school curriculum, certainly. When it comes to state legislatures and state school boards, they do have varying levels of responsibility and authority over state standards as well as curriculum. Often it resides with local school boards as well as the state school board and the Department of Education. I think that the best path forward for lawmakers who are rightfully concerned about the discrimination and critical race theory should be prepared to say that no public institution should compel a teacher or student to affirm or believe any idea that violates the Civil Rights Act of 1964, including the idea that someone is superior because of their race or the color of their skin, or that individuals deserve additional benefits or sanctions because of their ethnicities, or even that America is systemically racist. These are all ideas that violate these very concepts in federal law that are meant to protect us from racism and discrimination. It's important for local school boards and the state school board to be ready to address this. And if not, for state lawmakers to very carefully position themselves against the idea of compelled speech and rest these concepts in what is already there in the Civil Rights Act.
Well, thank you for those words, and thank you for your time, Mr. Jonathan Butcher with the Heritage Foundation. I really appreciate your insight today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.